The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
Because of perfectionism, the album was delayed. But it was more of us sort of figuring out where we draw the line, and what hills to die on, really. I think from that experience, I really learned to let things go. Because you can tinker with something forever, and it's really hard not to sometimes.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Willie Pearl is an Americana/Southern rock band from Nashville, Tennessee. Their new album is called Willie Pearl. My guest for this special bonus episode of the Habit Podcast is Henry Rogers. He wrote and sings lead on half the songs on the Willie Pearl album. The other songs are written by his cousin Ben Murphy. Henry, I should also mention, is my son and the engineer and editor for the Habit Podcast. He came by the house to record this episode. Henry Rogers, so happy to have you on the Habit Podcast.
Thanks, Dad. Happy to be here.
On this side of the Habit Podcast, you're always mixed up with the Habit Podcast.
That's
because
right.
You're the editor and producer of this podcast. So anyway, you and your band Willie Pearl have a new album called Willie Pearl.
That's right, yeah.
It's been in the works for a long time. About 2 years, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
What took you so long?
Well, we say 2 years, but a lot of the songs, or not a lot, but a few of the songs were written well before that. So it's really been, more like 3 or 4 years. But we've been recording consistently for 2 years. Part of that is just logistics. We could only rent out the smokestack in Berry Hill for weekends at a time, and it was kind of whenever we could get in there. And then another reason it took us so long was just because we hadn't really finished. A lot of people go into the studio, with a plan, and we didn't really do that.
Making it up.
Yeah, we kind of made it, and then we would write, and record the songs that we kind of wrote and recorded as we went for some of them. So. It just took a while.
Yeah. Willie Pearl's a 5-piece band. You call it a family band.
Mm-hmm.
You're a little slippery on who's
Right.
actually related and who's not.
Yeah, that's just a little something for the fans. Ben Murphy is my cousin, and that is the only real familial tie in the band. But we like to say we're all cousins or baby cousins.
Yeah. And so you write about half the songs. You wrote about half the songs that are on the record, and Ben wrote about half the songs. On the record. And talk to me about your process, because I know. Well, I'm not going to say what I know. You tell me about your process. And how that works with the band and all those kinds of things.
Right. My process changes usually from song to song. Sometimes I go through phases where I find something that really works and I kind of stick with that formula. But usually I get hooked on something, or I get really excited about something, like usually something small, like a line or a riff or a chord progression or a single chord or whatever. And I don't know where that is in the song. I just know that I like it, and it's usually not the first thing you hear in the song. But I'll just kind of go off of that and start writing, like use that as the centerpiece, and then sort of write off of that. But I usually if I can't find a direct narrative or a flow, like if I'm not going in order off of that initial nugget that I'm excited about, I'll start sort of writing random things and then put them together like a puzzle. But sometimes I get to a point where I can kind of just write it all at once. Like I know, like, okay, here's this verse. I know I have the progression for that. Like let's move on. And sometimes it does work where it's sequential and it's easier. But a lot of the times it's sort of putting things together like a puzzle. So as far as collaboration, Ben and I did sort of separately write the album 50-50, and but a lot of the time Ben will bring a song that's 80% done, or I'll bring a song that's 80% done, and then we'll sort of finish it. Like we just need the other to sort of take it across the finish line. And then the rest of the band really helps with structure, and outro is a big thing that we struggle with. It's something that I struggle with. And there are people in the band like Matt and George and Chasen who are a little bit more versed in that area. And so, the other guys will sort of fill in a lot of the gaps to make it emphatic, or, I don't know, make it flow like a song, So,
I'm interested in that idea that you said about that you got different pieces and you try to figure out how they come together, or how they fit together, and you put it together like a puzzle. Because I think in all writings of all kinds, I think it's important for a writer to pay attention to the fact that they had those two ideas close to each other probably means they connect somehow, even if the writer doesn't know how they connect. And then also, I mean, something I have to talk to sort of especially essayists about a lot is it's one thing for you to trust that they fit together somehow. You also have to help the receiver, the reader, or the audience feel how they fit together.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I know sometimes in songs it's not quite as, you have a little more leeway. It feels to me like you have a little more leeway to be a little more mysterious, maybe.
Right.
Than an essay. I mean, there are pieces of your songs that I don't understand how they fit together. But I assume you do.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't know if this is going to out me as a lazy writer, but sometimes I'll just have those pieces and put them next to each other and not really know why I put them next to each other, and then a week later I'm like, oh, this is why I did that, like, or I'll sort of like make up I'll sort of justify it in my head, but I think subconsciously sometimes that is kind of what's happening anyway. Wilco, Jeff Tweedy, his writing process is he'll strum and mumble and then sort of fill in whatever vowels that he's mumbling. And when I first heard that, I was a little disappointed because I liked the idea of it just sort of, pouring out of him, and he has these complete thoughts, and like, sure, I don't understand what a lot of them mean, but like they make a lot of sense to him, and that's not really the case. And now I've sort of adopted that that philosophy as well, where it doesn't even have to make that much sense to me.
Oh, okay. I've been working on the assumption that it made sense to you somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I just like the way words like sound next to each other. I think.
When I teach, sometimes every now and then a songwriter will come in to take one of my classes, that I'm teaching nonfiction, memoir, whatever, and I find they can be a little shifty. Songwriters, they're used to getting away with stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
That you can't get away with in prose.
Right.
And I have to, say that might work in your other job, but if you're going to write an essay, you need to be a little clearer.
Yeah. I was wondering what novelists and essay writers thought about that, and I think that confirms my suspicion.
Yeah, I mean you've got harmonics and dynamics and melody and things to carry ideas and feelings that are just gone from prose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I was really self-conscious about that idea at first, sort of not really even knowing what I am saying sometimes. And this is not all the time, but I think like as I just wrote more songs and I'm able to trust myself now, where it's not me. I don't second guess myself. I'm not there sitting there thinking like, is this good? Like, is this not good? Does this make sense? And now I'm kind of at a point where it's like, I write songs and I put that on the page and it's good because I did it because I wrote it down.
Okay.
And not really like it sounds like a kind of a cocky way to put it, but it's sort of a way of trusting yourself and trusting that process. So,
yeah. Well, I think in some ways it's not your business to say whether it's good or not.
Right. Yeah.
That's somebody else's business.
That's
you do what you can do,
yeah.
And you've got bandmates who can help you know, is this good or is it not good? Is this worth pursuing and developing? And do you get shut down by your bandmates sometimes? You've got what you thought was a pretty good idea, and they say, yeah, this just isn't working. Or
yes, sometimes. It's a little, it's more rare than you'd think, and a lot of times you have to use different language. Like you have to be like, let's find a way to make this work, And they give the other guys give me and Ben a pretty long leash. Like we have a lot of leeway, and they're so more attuned to the musical aspects of it rather than the lyrical, and so they kind of trust that we are going to make the right decision in that area. But Ben and I try to hold each other accountable for sure.
I was wondering about that, if y'all were a little more I started to say hard on each other. That's not the word I'm looking for, but a little more attentive to those things with each other. Yeah. All right, let's talk about perfectionism. I was working on the assumption that a big part of the reason that this record has been so long in coming is that you were wrestling around with perfectionism. I haven't really asked you about it. Is that to what extent has perfectionism been slowing you down?
Yeah, I don't. It's interesting because I think compromise is a big part of this conversation, and being in a group of 5 people, it's not really. It only takes one of us to be a perfectionist to really, sort of derail it. And it's. I think this project really taught me that I have to, meet them in the middle sometimes, and just say like, if this is what's going to get the album out faster, then this is the decision. This is what we should do, even if it's not necessarily something I agree with. I think because of perfectionism, the album was delayed. But it was more of us sort of figuring out where we draw the line, and what hills to die on, really.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of it. I do now, before we went into Smokestack, I had done 2 albums where recorded it in our houses and mixed and mastered and, you know, produced and wrote and did all that. And that took me way longer than, as far as hours go, way longer than doing the Smokestack album. And I think from that experience, I really learned to let things go. Because you can tinker with something forever, you know, and it's really hard not to sometimes.
Yeah, I always say, you know, when it comes to tinkering and knowing when to stop, at some point you're tinkering because you're paying attention to the way people are going to perceive you instead of what's going to serve the audience better.
Exactly.
I mean, and so, I find that's a way to sort of know, that's a rule of thumb to say, do I keep tinkering or not keep tinkering? You reach a point where it's not about the audience anymore. It's about your own, the way you present yourself, the way you're coming across. I think at least in the writing of prose.
A lot of creative work is about decision making, and it is hard to know. It's hard to find the line between, am I doing my best, you know, and when I say like, all right, it's done, is that the best I can do, or is that me being lazy because I want it done, you know? And so sometimes,
and those aren't the only two choices either, right? I mean, there's also, it's time to
wrap it up.
This.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, you can beat yourself up, or like you can take forever on something because you don't want to, you know, not do your best.
Yeah.
But then it'll sometimes never see the light of day. So.
Well, I'm assuming that it made a big difference to go from, I'm doing this in my house, and it all depends on, you know, these decisions that you're talking about all depend on me, to I've got people at Smokestack Records or Smokestack Studio, who I trust. I mean, Brendan Hapgood and
Sammy J.
Hayes, who I would think, knowing that they're going to help with those decisions, helps you get out of that whirlhole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that was another a big part, a big thing we learned with this recording this album is trusting these two engineers, and it took a while to get to that point. You know, we walk in there with our first 3 songs, and we had never met these guys, or most of us had never met them. And when I remember they would get on the intercom when we all are, you know, in our booths. They get on the intercom and say like, "Hey, let's do this. You know, let's try this structure change or whatever." And I remember at first we were all kind of looking at each other like, what? These guys think they can... like, that's a big change for some engineers to be asking about. But now, if Brendan says it's not working, I put down the guitar and I go in the control room. It's not working, you know. I completely trust him. But it takes a while to get to that point. Yeah.
Can imagine. Let's see. I think I want to switch to talk about genre for a little bit.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about genre for a minute. But first of all, what do you call your genre these days?
We say Americana roots rock.
Okay.
Because it's a pretty big umbrella. Yeah. I think we used to say Southern rock, and then or alternative country or something. But now we're getting a little indier. And there's some people in the band who don't like that word, okay. But it's just the truth. And so I think Americana sort of blankets that a little better. But it's all over the place.
Tell me, I mean, that A, what do you mean by indie, and B, why are some people in the band offended by that term?
I think it's because I don't want to speculate why people in the band are angered by that, but I think it's because we set out to do a Southern country thing, and then as we started writing songs, we realized this is, these are the kind of songs we want to write, not 12-bar blues or whatever. And we do write those too. We do write those. And I think indie implies some sort of soft, lots of effects and whatever. and not super lyrically driven. And that it might even be more vague than Americana, but we are moving out of the roots type of music. I don't know like if that's a permanent change or whatever, because it's always shifting. And a lot of it has to do with what we're listening to at the time.
Yeah. Well, it feels, I mean, and we'll talk about sort of the genre creep here in a minute, but it still feels to me like it feels like there's a lot of Memphis, from Al Green and all that kind of stuff. And I know Al Green's been important to you through the years. And Memphis and Nashville still feels to me like we're still kind of in that. It feels like you're still in Tennessee.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah,
for sure.
And I think Memphis music is very different from Nashville. I mean, it is very different from Nashville music, and yet y'all somehow are straddling that. I mean, I love that Al Green stuff, and I know the Fix It For You isn't on this album, but it's such an unusual and unique song that people who listen to this need to listen to, even if they even though it's not on your album. But and that's such an unusual song. That's I don't know. There's so much going on there. I mean, I love I just love that kind of, what I'm thinking of is Nashville and Memphis both in the same band.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I think we should add that to a bio or pitch deck or something. I like that idea.
Having said that, I mean, you talked about this. You're trying to come up with an umbrella that's really broad because your songs do straddle genres, and it's not even that it's not just they straddle genres; they straddle genres in different ways. It's not like it's a fusion of 2 or 3 different genres. It feels like you're just kind of. You can tell me what you think about this. It may hurt your feelings. I don't know, but it feels like you're jumping around from genre to genre.
Absolutely.
Have people in the music business said, "Hey, settle on a genre"?
Yes.
And you don't seem to be taking that advice.
No, I don't necessarily want to rein it in. And I think it keeps it interesting for us. I keeps it interesting for the listener, but especially for us to be able to, record 3 different songs in 3 different genres over a weekend. A big part of it too is that when you are recording spread out weekends, people make albums where they all get in a room for a week or 2, write it and record it, and it's going to sound, pretty similar to itself. Yeah. And we didn't really have that luxury. I don't necessarily hate that though. I think it keeps it exciting. It's really fun exploring different sounds and writing styles of like a soul type of thing rather than a country thing or whatever. I can't remember what your initial question was. Does that people ask you?
People, yeah.
I remember when we made our first album in the living room of the house in Murfreesboro, and even that one, we pitched it to some guys who they're doing some pro bono work. I think it was like a thing through Vandy, some sort of program through Vandy where like they'll help out some Vandy students, and our manager who's helping us out was a Vandy guy. So. And they had some strong opinions. They were really nice about it, but yeah, they were like, pick a genre, and then they were also like, the 2 things you need to be able to hear in a song are drums and vocals, because the mix was not great with that one, and they were nice about it. But yeah, picking a genre, I think that was the first. It didn't really occur to me to like have to focus on that, and I don't want that to be something that like we try to do. Like I don't have to steer us towards whatever. I think if it happens naturally, I would like that much better. So it doesn't bother me a whole lot, and I think maybe there's other opinions in the band, but Yeah, I think that's what we're gonna do until there's some shift that happens naturally, organically. Yeah.
Well, I mean, why don't we just, if you don't mind, play a couple of parts of a few songs, just to kind of see even what I'm talking about the genre jumping that you do.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Stand up if you feel it from down below. Move like you discovered the radio. Stayed up through the morning, now we're on a roll. Loosen up and let your freaky go. My dear Eliza, where you been? It's too cold in northern Michigan to feel the way we did. I need you right now, like I did back then. Now I'm running through the
For it was at least 3 years that you were playing 4 hours a night,
Yeah.
every Thursday night, 4 hours a night, which means you had to play a lot of covers just to.
That's
I mean,
right.
you had to play covers when you're a bar band anyway. But, and then I know you'd sneak in your originals as much as you could. But just for the sake of filling up 4 hours, you were doing so many different. I've always wondered how that
Absolutely.
affected. I mean, you musically, your writing, the fact that you're doing so many covers from so many different eras and genres.
Yeah, I didn't even think about including that in the reason our music is all over the place. But that's a really good point. And I think when you do, whether you like it or not, whether you enjoy it or not, as far as learning new covers goes, it does open your eyes to music that you would otherwise be listening to, let alone examining, so you get hooked on a cool chord progression from, some pop group or something that always gets requested at the bar. So you're finally learning it or whatever. And then, it does expand your taste a little bit. But also I think the bar gig thing really sharpened musical ability more than anything. So just being able to play those styles, not necessarily being able to write them, but just to switch back and forth between styles for musicianship wise, I think was a big part of it too.
You never got things thrown at you at the bar, did you?
I'm sure we did. I wasn't out of. I don't think it was out of disgust.
Just
I
out
think
of
it
exuberance.
was. Yeah, exuberance is a great word for it. Yeah,
There was some exuberant crowds.
Yeah.
I came a few times, but since you started playing at 10, there was a limit to how much of that I was ready for.
Yeah, it's not for everyone. That's for sure.
Although Chasen's grandmother stayed until 2.
That's right.
Shut y'all down one time.
Yeah, no, she's like that though. She's built a little different.
All right. I want to talk a little bit about the extent to which your writing is confessional. And has it gotten more confessional, less confessional as time has gone on? I mean, you were writing songs when you were in high school, certainly, maybe junior high. I can't remember. And it seemed like that seemed pretty confessional when you were, an angsty teenager.
Yeah.
And anyway, tell me about the sort of confessional nature of your writing.
I treat a lot of songs like journal entries, and I think that's one of the reasons that I can put two different things together and that don't really make sense. It's because a lot of the time I'm writing a song, it's about that specific point in my life, and those two phrases do mean something to me because that was what was going through my head at that specific point that I'm writing
You
about.
can go back and look at the page and see if those were going through your
Yeah,
head at the same
exactly.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the confessional / like journal type of songwriting is a little bit more of or not a little bit. It's a lot more of the emotionally driven. Like I'm inspired, so I write that way. And I think it was Osinga who said, you can't do that all the time. You can't just write when you're feeling the highs and lows. You have to train yourself to write, all the time. But of course, if you're writing all the time, you are going to write when there's highs and lows. Yeah. And that's a lot. That's when those songs come about. So I will write a song when I'm sitting down and just cranking out a song because I feel like I need to, not necessarily because like, I have to speak my heart right now or, journal about this. When I'm just writing for the sake of writing, I like a song like My Dear Eliza, which is on the album. That's kind of what'll come out of that, where it's I'm trying to write a narrative, like a story, a fictional story, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything to me. I want it to mean something to other people, but it doesn't necessarily mean much to me personally. And then on the flip side, when I'm confessional in my feelings, journaling, I'll write a song like The Garden. Yeah. And that came at a time where I just had knee surgery and I was bedridden and medicated, and staying at you guys' house, and saw y'all in the garden, and sort of wanted to relate that rehabilitation or fostering growth and making something beautiful is something that you guys did with this house and your children, and but in my feelings, writing things like that, and then I have this bridge that's a sort of stream of consciousness, like on painkillers, talking about the things that stress me out or whatever. And that's not a song that someone else can cover necessarily. Yeah. Whereas My Dear Eliza, I would be happy for anybody to pick that up.
Yeah, that might be played. Hope that would be played in Floribama.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But I don't see Dierks Bentley talking about going crazy and mice and things like that.
Yeah. Fictional mice. Let's clarify.
Fictional mice. Oh yeah. Well, the mice were at our house.
I think maybe you were hallucinating.
Not in this house.
Okay.
No, not in this house.
Gotcha.
No. We had a mice problem in the other house.
I thought you were. I was afraid you were commenting on some mice.
No. There's no. To clarify, there's no mice in Jonathan Rogers' house.
Well, I think the moment's passed for talking about. I don't know. I feel like there's more to say about My Dear Eliza.
That was one that I had written that well before we recorded it, and sort of tucked it away, and Ben sort of forced me to play some stuff that was in my notebook, and he really sort of breathed some life into that, because I never thought that. I think it was because I was so removed from it, and I like the personal stuff that I didn't really want to give it a chance or show it to anybody. But Ben insisted that we record that one, and now it's one of my favorite songs.
Yeah, it's a great song. I love it, and it's not hard to imagine, as you said, that song being covered, and I was not expecting a song you wrote to mention Northern Michigan, but
I don't know how that happened.
I did have somebody ask me, by Northern Michigan, does he mean the Upper Peninsula or just the northern part of the Mitten?
I think wherever it's coldest is what I was going. It's too cold in Northern Michigan. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, your cousin,
I'm sure it's all cold.
Yeah, your cousin Ross spent some time in Northern Michigan fishing or something, so I thought maybe it had something to do with that, but it's just completely made up.
The syllables worked out.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, okay, but I know we need to wrap up soon, but I did want to ask you about the idea, what it's like to grow up in Nashville, like to you grew up in Nashville around people who, it wasn't all that unusual for people to make a living in a creative field,
right?
And for that matter, in a house where it wasn't unusual. It was. I mean, I've always been a little surprised at my kids wanting to do creative work when they saw how hard it was to actually pay the mortgage doing creative work,
right? And
so, I mean, this feels self-indulgent to ask. But what was it? Tell me about that. I mean,
okay, so for the first part, growing up in Nashville, I think if anything, it showed me how hard it is, and but also that it is something that you can make a living doing it. Even if you're not Morgan Wallen. So it gave me a really realistic perspective. But I think, you were talking about you're surprised that your kids want to do creative work. I think that was so inspiring as a kid to see you fully pursue something that you were so passionate about. And it was, obviously it's evident that it was hard, sometimes to pay the bills or whatever in the early days. But that didn't, I think that really just showed me, how badly you wanted it and how much, you loved doing what you do. You reading the manuscripts for the trilogy, the Wilder King trilogy at the dinner table and kind of editing in real time and seeing what that's like and sort of having these conversations with yourself like, oh no, I already said that here, whatever. I learned a lot from that and it didn't, it was incredibly inspiring. It wasn't a deterrent at all. It really just showed me that you can do this. It's not some like pipe dream. It's not, your distant relatives who think it's ridiculous to to go into this line of work. I think being in this house and being in this town, it made it more realistic for me rather than anything. And it also, I feel like the small towners who come, to Nashville from the bus, they expect to write a hit record. I think not having that perspective gave me some longevity. I mean, it's not like I've been doing this for that long, but
you've been doing it for a pretty long time.
I've definitely seen people quit, that have started the same time I did. So, I think I sort of had it in my head that was not an option for me, and I think that was sort of the same thing with you. You're going to be doing this no matter what, and you got to make it work. So
yeah. And so your bandmates, no, I guess Matt's from Nashville, but the other, I mean, 3 of the 5 aren't from Nashville. Did you and Matt have to? I don't know, but I don't know what the question is. I mean, those guys moved from Georgia. Well,
were they expecting something different than?
Or did I mean, was it helpful? I assume it was helpful to them to have somebody who'd been around this sort of thing for a long time.
Yeah, I think so. They definitely, I think. I mean, I had hoped to moving from or graduating college and moving in with the band. I had hoped that we would find major success within a couple years. So I don't want to make it sound like they were the only ones with that goal.
Sure.
But I did know how unrealistic that was, and that I was going to be doing it no matter what. I think when COVID happened, that was a test of faith for everybody, but especially the out of towners who their families are dying in other states, and they're still in Nashville, holed up, trying to pursue this thing. I think that was definitely the biggest test, but now we're at a good point where everyone's sort of sees the same way and has a more realistic view on it. So yeah.
All right. Well, let's. We could do this all day, but we need to wrap up. Cool. So, tell me about who are the writers that make you want to write? You've heard this question many times as the engineer and editor.
Blindsided. Let me think. Okay, so I have Jason Isbell. I just love him so much. He's so good at creating a narrative, and his imagery's incredible. He uses good verbs, which is something you like.
Yeah, he does. Yeah,
he uses good verbs.
Yeah, and somebody, I think it was you, who said something about all dads like Speed Trap Town.
Yeah,
this dad does.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh man, that is such a good song. Then I have David Gray he was pretty important, significant figure for my songwriting. And you had said about David Gray that if he, was born in this region of the United States, he would definitely be a country writer.
He's like the best country music singer in the UK.
Yeah.
He was on a short rotation around here.
He was. Yeah. The White Ladder record just really changed everything. Along with that Cranberries record. Heavy rotation, and it kind of laying in. Those were two that we were allowed to listen to when we fell asleep, along with the Doug Powell, I think. But the Cranberries one, I remember laying in my bed, just head was spinning. I had some dark thoughts, some confusing thoughts.
Sorry.
And same with White Ladder. Who else do I have? Tom Petty is. I try to include an oldie, older than David Gray. I guess David Gray's been doing it for a long time, but I listen to anything Tom Petty does, and he's so relatable and conversational. It's just incredible.
Every time I hear Tom Petty, it takes me back to high school, and then I realize that song. I had 2 kids when that song came out. I assumed I was in running around Warner Robins High School when he made that song. Everything sounds like 1987 in his.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's all good. Jason Molina he was in Magnolia Electric Company, and he's a downer of a writer, but he's really good. And he kind of keeps the same themes in a lot of his I wouldn't say songs, but his records. Like he has these images, like like a red moon and he writes about dogs, and he just has these sort of recurring images, themes that I love. But again, a downer. So, and then a new guy, MJ Linderman, I've been listening a lot of, and he just talk about conversational. He's just like it sounds like you're having a couple beers with him, and and then some lawn chairs, and he's sort of just telling you about random thoughts he's having. He loves writing about sports. He loves talking about basketball, and then he'll just make up these phrases that he expects you to know what he's talking about. He'll just make up a term.
That's funny.
I had to look up one recently, but he just sort of imposes these terms on you, expects it to make sense, and I love that.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
All right, well, Henry Rogers, thanks so much for being here. I love Willie Pearl, everybody's new favorite rock and roll band.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Dad.
The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. You can support their work, including this podcast, by becoming a member. Visit rabbitroom.com/membership. The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community. funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.